Okay, it's 9:05 and we are ready to start. Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. I'm Lupe Jaime Milam, and I have the pleasure of starting and opening up for this training. Like we've mentioned previous, we have about 450 plus friends across the host state that are going to be joining us for this training. So we're quite excited to get this going. The second thing is that they were also very, very lucky to have a list of panelists who will be joining us for this session, who are really the lumineers in the field of dual language learners. So to have collectively these individuals is just such, a gift for us today. We also want to take the time to thank you for taking the time to be able to participate in our impromptu session of a Zoom versus in person. And finally, we also want to give many thanks to our partners and friends, both at CDE that have so generously provided funding for this project, as well as thanking our partners from Early Edge, who have continuously been champions in this work that we're doing collectively together. With that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my friend and colleague, Maria Ceballos from Fresno Unified.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Lupe said, we're so excited to have you here today. My name is Maria Ceballos. I'm a director in the Early Learning Department in Fresno Unified School District. So before we get started with the agenda, we're going to go ahead and cover a couple of things. We want to let you know that the webinar is being recorded. You're going to have access to the webinar on a website that we're going to be sharing later on. We also ask you that there's a Q&A box that is going to be monitored throughout the webinar. So please use that Q&A box to ask specific questions about the content of the webinar. We also have the chat box for any other questions, and both of them are going to be monitored. In the chat box later on, we're also going to be adding the link to the toolkit. If you have not received a copy of the toolkit, at the end of the webinar, we're going to be providing information about who to contact to make sure that you do get the toolkit. We have plenty of toolkits and we want to make sure that everybody gets a copy. One last thing is that there's going to be no assigned breaks during the webinar, so please feel free to take as many breaks as you think are necessary. So now we're going to go ahead and get started with the agenda. As you can see here on the screen, we have a full agenda for the next 3 hours. We're going to begin with the background of the language learning project. We're going to go ahead and move into the recent science, early bilingualism and school success for young dual language learners. We're going to continue on with building on the foundations of the developmentally appropriate practices. We're going to go ahead and spend some time on the personalized oral language learning strategies. And we're also going to be able to hear from people that have implemented the POL strategies. We're going to have some time to review the toolkit and go over the sections and give you an overview of what to expect. And there's also going to be some time for questions and answers. Towards the end, we're going to be able to hear from communities that have implemented the language learning project. And then we're going to go ahead and finalize with the closing. So we're going to, as you can see, we have a full agenda. We're excited to have, as Lupe talk about, the presenters. We have Dr. Sue Bredekamp, the early education specialist. We have Dr. Linda Espinosa, Professor Emeritus, University of Missouri, Columbia. We also have Dr. Carola Oliva Olsen, Associate Professor, California State University in Channel Islands. We also have Elizabeth Magruder with us, Early Education Consultant. We have Whit Hayslip, Early Childhood Education Consultant with Fresno Starting Smart and Strong Initiative. We also have Ana Arambula, Language Learning Project Coach. We have Jessica Gutierrez, our preschool teacher in Fresno Unified School District. We have Deanna Mathias, Early Learning Department, Executive Officer in the Early Learning Department with Fresno Unified School District. And we have Lupe Jaime, Senior Director of Early Care and Education in the Office of Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to our first presenters, who is Whit and Jessica Gutierrez.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Whit Hayslip, and I've had the good pleasure of working in Fresno on this project. Some of you that know me know how much I love to sing with children. And for the 51 years I've worked in early childhood, I have spent a great deal of time singing with them. What has been amazing to me, after 51 years, there are many new things we can learn. And through the Language Learning Project, I have learned more deeply about the power of songs and chants, and I'm much more intentional now about their use in terms of language development, especially for our dual language learners. One of the things we do in all of our trainings is we start off with a song or a chant. So folks, I know you're sitting in front of your computer, but get ready to sing because we're going to do one of the songs and chants that we always start our training with. This one's called I Am the Conductor, and though I can't see you, I want you to get your little batons up there so that you can be conducting your orchestra here. So here we go. I'll sing a line and then you out there sing out because we can't hear you. So I won't know if you can't carry a tune. So come on, here we go. I am the conductor, I come from early ed. I am the conductor, I come from early ed. I can play on my piano, Plink, 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 plink. Okay, you're gonna practice with your chat boxes right now, folks. I wanna see some other instruments in the chat box. Come on, somebody give me a different instrument other than the piano. Do we? Oh, guitar, here we go. I am the conductor, I come from early ed. I am the conductor, I come from early ed. I can play on my guitar, Strum, 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 plink, 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 plink. Blink, 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 blink. Okay, I still have the good fortune to be able to work with children 0 to 5. So I sing this song with them, and frequently someone will say guitar, and I will start going strum, 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 and the children will let me know that's not how a guitar sounds because they're all used to electric guitars. So we're gonna do it with an electric guitar. Here we go. I am the conductor, I come from early ed. I am the conductor, I come from early ed. I can play on my electric guitar, Strum, 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 plink, 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 plink. Blink, 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 blink. Okay, just for a moment, look at all the vocabulary and language we just shared there. And through the years, I have been singing songs and I have not stopped to think about that vocabulary and that language. Also, think about the repetition in this song. You're going to be hearing a lot about repetition today. So you're going to hear more about this later, but I want all of you to be thinking about the power of songs and chants and how we all use them. Now, we're also going to realize about the power of dual language and supporting home language. So my good friend Jessica is going to help us do this in Espanol.
Claro que sí, señor Wei, gracias. Vamos a cantarlo en español porque vamos a aprender que todo lo que se hace en inglés se hace en cualquier idioma que hablen los niños en la clase. Entonces vamos a empezar. Yo soy conductora de cuidado de niños. Yo soy conductora de cuidado de niños. Yo puedo tocar con mi piano. Con mi piano. Blink, 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 blink. Ahora necesito sugerencias para otros instrumentos en el chat, por favor. Vamos a hacer maracas. Yo soy conductora de cuidado de niños. Yo soy conductora de cuidado de niños. Yo puedo tocar con mis maracas, con mis maracas. Blink, 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 blink. A ver, otro instrumento, vamos a usar el tambor. Yo soy conductora de cuidado de niños. Yo soy conductora de cuidado de niños. Yo puedo tocar con mi tambor, con mi tambor. Pum 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 pum. Plink, 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 plink. Gracias. Ahora, I'm going to pass it on to Señor Witt.
Thank you, Jessica. Jessica, those were very quiet maracas there. I'm going to do a little louder maraca. Shh. Okay, we could hear them that time. Okay, let's go to that next slide here. Are we going there? Here we go. Okay, this slide says Language Learning Project, how we got started. And I just want to sort of trace back the history of this project. In 2014, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation started a wonderful new initiative called Starting Smart and Strong in 3 communities in California: Oakland, San Jose, and Fresno. And part of that project was for us to really focus on improving the quality of adult-child interactions in that community, the adults and all of those children birth to 5 that they care for. And so it was a project that was not just focused on one community or one sector, but on multiple sectors of the system in that community. So I was fortunate enough to be asked to provide technical assistance to the Fresno community in this project. What it did was it began to bring all of the different sectors: Head Start, Early Head Start, Family Child Care, Family Friends and Neighbors, school district programs, community programs together. And one of the things that the David and Lucille Packard Foundation asked us to do was to look at our data and to focus on a need that we really wanted to address. And with the help of the Early Learning Lab and Chris Fiorino, we began to analyze our data. And it was agreed among all the different agencies that were represented that a pressing need in Fresno was supporting our dual language learners. We looked at some of the long-term success and academic success of our dual language learners, and we knew we needed to do more. So we began to focus on that, coming together and working together. And with the help of Dr. Linda Espinosa, we began to set a project and set a plan for how we were going to improve professional development and bring agencies together. And so what we did at that point was we looked at the work of Dr. Espinosa and Elizabeth Magruder and Carola Oliva Olson and said this could form the basis. Their work on what we call POLE, which you're going to be learning about, could form the basis of this work. I want to tell you, we started that work in 2016 and we had remarkable success. 2 things happened which we're so excited about. One was that it really did improve services to young dual language learners. We saw differences in what we were doing, the strategies that were being used. And secondly, it improved our early childhood system by coming together from multiple agencies and multiple sectors and focusing on a single problem. We began to collaborate on many different problems. And that's one of the things we're most excited about this. This is for all children and all of our communities. It is a way to bring us together. And so what happened was we were seeing such success with this program, getting a lot of interest from other communities, other states about what was going on with the Language Learning Project in Fresno. So in 2019, we are so grateful that the California Department of Education, who started the grant program for professional development around dual language learners. And so that what happened, that allowed us to deepen our work. It gave us some money to say, okay, we've learned a lot here in Fresno. Now, how can we begin to spread it? And so this grant allowed us to do 2 things. The first thing it allowed us to do was to go into some other communities. And because of our interest and our commitment to the Central Valley, we selected Kern County and Tulare County. And so we went into those 2 communities and we began to replicate the work that we had done in Fresno. We started working with coaches. We started working with professionals, doing professional development and following their implementation of the POLE strategies. We also had a second part to this because the state said to us, it is not enough to just focus on those two communities. We want you to do some work that will help our entire state. So that they gave us money to develop what we're going to be looking at today, the toolkit for implementing the language learning project. Initially, we thought we would be together with you in several conferences around the state to share this work, but today we're going to be sharing what we've done and what we've learned together in these webinars. And we were actually a little excited because we're realizing that we're actually able to touch many more of you today than we would have in those smaller conferences. So we encourage you to learn from this, take what's meaningful to you, and we believe it can enrich your programs and your communities. Now it is my turn to turn it over to a person who was sort of the godmother of all of this work, Dr. Linda Espinosa.
Linda is not here, so it'll be Dr. Carola Oliva Olsen.
Okay, I've got to tell you, Dr. Linda Espinosa, the godmother, lives in way up on a hill in Colorado. So that Carola Oliva Olsen, who is one of the other co-founders of POLE, will be sharing this science. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Buenos dias. And I am honored to be helping out in this role, especially since it means this is Dr. Linda Espinosa's section. So with that, what I'm going to be talking and sharing with you is about what we know from science. What do we know now that has illuminated and the field and the work that we have done all together in this project and beyond. So the first thing to do always is to clarify what we're talking about. And in this case, we're talking about children, and we're talking about children who have certain experiences that are very important in how they support and they require additional kind of support as well because of how they're learning and developing. And these children are called children who are dual language learners. The distinction in using this terminology to talk about children is that they're learning in particular and unique ways based on that early exposure to languages. We know that the first 5 years are foundational because it's when children are developing language skills. And so what that particular experience looks like when you're exposed to more than one language makes it very important in how it determines it helps build that connection in the brain. So for children who are in the first years of life exposed to both languages, meaning at the same time since birth, we would talk about children who are simultaneous learners. And for those who are exposed to the second language, in this case, English, later on, maybe when they're 3 or they're 4, we talk about sequential learners. And we need to distinguish between the term that is used later on in the kindergarten 12 grades, because in there children are referred to English language learners or English learners. And this distinction is very important because many times we hear a lot of confusion and misinterpretation of who is a dual language learner and who is an English learner. We are dual language learners for the rest of our lives once we have been exposed to more than one language from birth. Well, we know that this is really important. And while you can read many of the items in this slide, what we know is that children who are dual language learners are, in California, the majority of the children. So if we think about the state in birth through 5, 60% of the children are dual language learners. So this has important ramifications, implications for all of us. because it means that as educators, we might have one or more or many children who are dual language learners in our care. And so as we think about the trajectory for children who are dual language learners and the variation in languages and experiences, background, culture, immigration status, all of this is so diverse that right now we're even talking about super diversity, and that all of this background has important effects on how it affects directly how children learn. So all of us in this field need to be aware of the child's background, cultural and linguistic background, and beyond, so that we can better serve the children and their families. And as we think about the children who are dual language learners and enter kindergarten and are designated English learners after taking the assessments, the proper, within the system of the K through 12 system, we also need to look at how many children end up leaving that status and are reclassified as no longer being English learners, but how many stay in that status for longer. And that is a chronic problem that we need to address. And what we can do in early childhood is build a strong, sound foundation in language and literacy, so that this prevents children from starting kindergarten at a disadvantage.
Hi, Carola.
Yes, you're there.
Hi, if you can go back a slide, my technology is now somewhat working, so I'm able to audio join the webinar. So if you want, I can take over now, but you're doing a great job.
Please do.
Okay, well let me just quickly go through some of these demographics from California, because the statistics in California, I think, are significant to what we're doing in Fresno and across the state. But the main point that I think Carola was addressing right now is that the rates of our English language learners that have been reclassified to fluent English proficient has increased barely in the last 3, 4, 5 years. And they haven't achieved well in the California achievements of student progress and performance in the last 3 or 4 years either, as you can see by the first point. However, the good news, and this is really significant because it's what we start working on, from the earliest years, is that of those English language learners that do get reclassified, more than 64% meet the English language arts standards, math standards, science standards, beginning in 3rd grade, whereas only about 45% of English only. So what this tells us is that a dual language learner who has capacity in their first language and has proficiency in English actually outperforms monolinguals beginning at about 3rd grade and throughout the rest of their schooling career. Very significant because it helps us understand that advantage that dual language learners have. The other point that we need to make is that we actually have no consistent criteria for identifying dual language learners during the preschool years, and we have no standard teacher competencies that we look to for those who provide services to children who are not native English speakers. We can go to the next slide. So to begin this, again, what I would like to do is to have everyone who is bilingual, and that's many of you, just take a minute and think about your earliest experiences in learning a second language. Okay, what do you remember about it? How old were you? What was the context? Was it your family? Was it in school? Was it in the community? And do you remember any of the feelings associated with learning that second language? And if you're monolingual and you serve dual language learners, think about the different languages that are in your program, the different language capacities among all of your staff, and what those early experiences in providing services to families and children with whom you did not share a language, what that was like.
Linda, would you mind speaking out a little bit higher? For some, I can see in the chat that they are barely able to listen, to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will. Can you hear? Is this better?
Oh, a lot better. A lot better. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. What I think this little time that we had reflecting back upon your earliest experiences with bilingualism, what that counts as is your personal experience, and that is evidence. That is that is a way of knowing your understanding of bilingualism, and that actually counts as evidence. So it's a type of evidence that we use in scientific studies called anecdotal evidence. So what you know, the experiences you've had with other children and families or personally, contributes to our literature. As I go through the scientific findings and some of the studies, I want you to think about your personal experiences and how that is consistent with, or perhaps a little bit inconsistent with, what I'm going to present. The evidence base for the development of dual language learners, go back a slide, sorry, I'm not quite ready for this yet. The evidence base actually comes out of a recent report from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And this report studied second language acquisition birth to age 21, which was the same time. So, and remarkably, the findings and recommendations are remarkably similar across the birth to toddler to preschool and school-age children. It was a 17-member committee. We took 3 years. We looked at experimental studies, we looked at case studies, we looked at longitudinal studies, and we looked at anecdotal evidence to come up with certain findings that we would have confidence in that could guide our practices in serving dual language families and dual language learners. So what I'm going to talk about now are just the major findings, not some of the subtleties or nuances, because it's a 507-page book, and I don't think many of us really want to use that other than maybe to help us go to sleep at night. But anyway, so what does the evidence tell us? What is has implications for what we do in early care and education? So where do we have evidence? We have strong evidence, and these is the accumulation across all studies, which is that all infants and toddlers and preschoolers have the capacity to learn more than one language, and balanced bilingualism carries significant social, linguistic, cognitive, and cultural benefits. In fact, one of the major findings from this report in Chapter 4 is that there is a universal underlying human capacity to learn 2 languages as easily as one. So all infants, including children who have disabilities, language impairments, have different identified developmental issues, all children benefit from a bilingual environment. And all children benefit from social, linguistics, and cognitive advantages as a result, specifically as a result of being exposed to more than one language from their earliest years. So, that was huge, because for a long time people thought that young children who were exposed to more than one language easily became confused. And that is exactly wrong. Actually, when I first started in this profession, I was told that children should be kept in one language until they reach kindergarten, and then only minimally exposed to a second language. There could be nothing farther from the truth. What we're showing from brain studies and neurocognitive studies is that the human brain is ideally prepared to learn and benefit from exposure to multiple languages. So, and the second point is that we have those that have more balanced bilingual skills, show the greatest advantages. So just a little bit of language, just knowing how to say hello, goodbye, how are you, and where's the restaurant when you're going to a foreign country or whatever, those things don't really result in the cognitive advantages that I'm going to talk about. It really requires a young child or an adult to know how to hear, speak, listen to, comprehend, and in some cases read and write a second language. Okay, the third point, and this was new with the report, is that when you begin bilingual exposure before 3 years of age, with sufficient exposure, you get the best long-term school-related English-based achievement outcomes. That those years, birth to 3, seem to be an ideal neurologically, cognitively adaptive period of development that allows children to easily learn all the structural features of language, both the vocabulary, the grammar, the sentence structure, the sounds of different languages and how they can discriminate between them. Those birth to 3 years seem to be really important for both learning first and second language. This is very active time for language learning, which I'm sure most of you know already, but I think this research confirms it for second language learners as well. And the final point on that slide, children need language exposure from competent speakers of that language. We know that as well, but this research has confirmed it, that they need good language role models that use a diversity of language, a diversity of sentence structure, use complexity of words, et cetera. And that's how they acquire that level of language mastery that's so important for school success. And the next slide, and again, this is just a graphic representation of what I have just said, that those years, and actually this graph doesn't go into it, but prenatally, in the last trimester of pregnancy, the auditory canals have matured and developed, and children are hearing and processing language. But those first years, from birth to about somewhere between 3 and 7, that auditory capacity to hear language and discriminate among the features of different languages, that starts to decrease and rapidly decreases throughout the lifespan. So if you look at that graph and you put yourself on the bottom axis, you can see most of us are past the point of being able to learn a second language efficiently and being able to articulate the language without an accent. So if you learn a language later in life, you're probably going to speak with an accent, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. The good news is anybody can learn a second language at any time in their life. It just takes more focus and more concentrated attention. It's not too late for any of us who haven't had that opportunity to be able to acquire a second language and experience the benefits. Okay, let's go on. So we also have more strong evidence for language interactions need to be, just like with any high-quality early childhood program, frequent back and forth language interactions with children that are responsive to the child's interests, so that when a child indicates a strong interest, let's say in a truck, you don't try to redirect them and talk about a book at that point. You really try to expand and be responsive to what it is that child is interested in and capitalize on that. And that seems to be when they learn the language, they learn the concepts. So expanded and varied to promote oral language development, just like in any monolingual early childhood setting as well. One of the basic principles of high quality, developmentally appropriate practice. And an emphasis on oral language skills during the early childhood so that you give children chances to hear and speak and engage and use language across the day. So they're not mainly being exposed to language that's directive, that they have to respond to what's being spoken to them, but they have chances to actually speak and experiment with these new languages. So the third point is stronger L1 or the home language and English skills at kindergarten entry predicted the best school outcomes. And again, the findings are that when children have some level of English skills at kindergarten entry and strong first language schools, and that's probably the most important point, that those strong home language skills combined with some of the English proficiency, and that's what we're going to talk about today. That's the best preparation for kindergarten. And that L1 must be explicitly and systematically supported, or it will decline once dual language children are exposed to English. And that's been found for 15, 20 years. Once children go into a primarily English program, they start to lose the desire to use English. If that's what their peers are using, that's what they're hearing in school and their teachers, they start to express a preference for using English and only English. So there's some issues in here we need to attend to. We know that specific instructional approaches and strategies are required in addition to a basic developmentally appropriate practice. We need frequent assessment, which is vital to understanding the progress the child's making both in their home language and English. And we have a lot of work to do on that point in our programs. We also know that families are critical in the education of dual language learners, particularly in the continuation of the home language development. We have to work with families to maintain that home language, and that ECE teachers need specific training and competencies. So you need your basic competencies and then some additional strategies in order to work effectively with dual language learners. So the basic principle on the next slide, the basic principle for high quality education for DLL, systematic exposure to English and ongoing support of home language or L1 in a language-rich environment is critical. So you need both languages within the context of a high-quality program. The next point, we have to deal with home language loss, and that is the unfortunate history of many of our programs, is that once children enter into a program, they do start to lose home language, which is so critical to all of their future sociocultural, educational, and economic development. So, and again, I want to point to the third point, more loss to early exposure to English if you don't have home language support. And I think across all of our programs, we recognize this, and we are intentionally trying to incorporate it into our programs. And again, the critical role of parents. So, our basic approaches in the state of California, which have been described in our state manuals, policies, and directives, are the first language model would be a dual language model, and that's the most highly recommended. And that's a model where you provide pretty much equal exposure to a home language and to English. And if you have the capacity and the materials and the staffing and the structural abilities to implement it, that is a model that will result in high levels of language outcomes and future school success. However, in California and across the country, we don't always have that capacity. So our primary language model that is used in California is primarily English with support for L1. And that includes a set of strategies that all early care and education staff can implement to support all dual language learners. Hence, that's why we developed POLE, or personalized oral language learning. So the global high quality is important, but not sufficient. These additional adaptations, enhancements, and strategies specifically for DLLs is important to equal progress. The next slide about the early childhood workforce competency. What do young or teachers who work with young dual language learners, what are the competencies that seem important? Obviously, to understand the first and second language development in early years, we need to know how that happens. We need to be able to implement proven strategies to support oral language development in both languages. And we need to understand how to positively engage with diverse families. And we can promote the development and learning of DLLs through effective instructional approaches across all domains of learning. And then finally, to understand how personal beliefs and experiences influence language interactions with DLLs, because we all have attitudes and beliefs. And that leads us to POLE. So POLE contains all of those elements of professional development which underlie effective workforce competency when working with dual language learners. And just to make that point about when being bilingual can be a life or death experience, I have a little video that I hope you enjoy. Okay. I think we have a little bit of time for questions and answers if anybody has a burning question or needs something clarified.
Okay, Linda, let's see. I have a few. One is, how do you support children's dual language programs when preschool programs are only offered in one language, but children move on to kindergarten classrooms that are dual language? So I think the different, yes. So what is the model of the balance model and the implications if they go, for example, to a 90-10, to a 50-50 in kindergarten, or if they're in an English only and then end up in a dual language?
Okay, well, let me respond in a couple of ways. So if you have a preschool program and they want to implement a dual language approach, then you can structure that in a variety of ways, alternate languages, alternate speakers within the program during certain parts of the day. But structurally, you'd want to make sure that you have a fairly equal amount of time in each language with comparable resources and content and staff capacities. If you're doing an English-only model at pre-K, of course, I'd have to say we don't recommend that. Head Start doesn't recommend that. Nobody is advocating that that's an acceptable model for children who are not native English speakers or who don't have proficiency in English. The POLE strategies, this program actually was designed to address that situation where you have only monolingual English-speaking teachers and multiple languages among children, and working with families, that you are able to promote the ongoing development of home language while also doing, if most of your teacher-led instruction is in English, there are still ways to promote the development of both languages, and that's what we're recommending. So if you come out of a dual language program or an English with home language support program and enter into a kindergarten model that is a 50-50 dual language, you should be fine. if you enter into a kindergarten program that is English only, that, you know, we wouldn't recommend that. I mean, we recommend continuation of bilingual support depending upon how they, of course, scored on their early English proficiency test. But I would say that they are still prepared to learn English, probably not at the same rates as native English speakers. And if the child goes into a 90-10 program, then their first language is going to be strengthened to a greater extent than their English acquisition. And whether or not that is sufficient to become fully bilingual with those cognitive advantages by third grade, I think that's still an open question.
Thank you, Linda. And let's see, what are the ramifications if the staff are not competent in home language?
If the staff are not competent in the home language and the teacher speaks only English, I mean, that's exactly what POL speaks to. So we have methods to engage with families and community members to bring that home language into the classroom in a variety of ways. And you're going to hear about those from Elizabeth Magruder and myself as we talk about POL strategies. But the primary emphasis in that type of a model is really to find competent speakers of those home languages and help to bring that into the classroom so that children see it in print, they hear it spoken, maybe they speak it themselves, maybe they teach their teacher about, you know, how to use it. But they have to in some way see that home language validated in the classroom, and there are multiple ways that teachers can do this.
And the last one is, what about accent and grammatical errors?
Right. I often do get the question about accents. For instance, parents may be first generation in the United States and they had their first language very well established before they acquired English, and maybe learned English in their adolescent or sometimes even in college. So they speak with an accent. And this is not a problem for children learning to speak English without an accent as long as that exposure is early enough. What they found is that children hear through accents of their parents when they have models of standard English pronunciation and enunciation. And they have their friends, they have their teachers. They're hearing the English phonology outside of the house, and that's what they learn, and that's what they start speaking. So they rarely would replicate the accents of the parents. So, and I actually say, accents don't bother me a bit, because as long as a person is comprehensible and speaks with some sort of a foreign language, it doesn't interfere with comprehension. And that's what we're really after. So I wouldn't spend any time worrying about accents unless they're so heavy and combined with grammatical and lexical limitations as well. Then I think you'd find a speaker who had some competence in that language.
Thank you, Dr. Espinosa. I can see wonderful comments. You should take a look at them and how much they appreciate your presentation. And a lot of questions about POL, which is exactly what's coming next. So with that, Maria, we turn it back to you.
Thank you, Carola. The next presenter, we have Dr. Sue Bredekin. Hi, Sue, can you hear us?
Sorry, shall I start again? I said I was muted.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. I just want to say that it's a pleasure to be with all of you this morning, and it has been a privilege to be part of this project and to learn from this incredible team. I also want to thank all of you for all that you do for young children, and especially for dual language learners. Your work is more important now than it has ever been. I was reflecting just a minute ago on Linda's questions about our early experiences. And my father was from an Italian immigrant family and spoke only Italian in his home until he went to school. And yet he learned, he could speak it his entire life. And until he died, he spoke it in the last days of his life, and yet he never exposed us to it as children. And I have regretted that my adult life, and have tried to learn, and yet and have stumbled and not been very successful. And so your work, when I think of having lost the capacity to be bilingual, I regret that very much. And so your work, I think, could not be more important than ever. So what I'm to do is to talk about how POLE builds on the foundation of developmentally appropriate practice. And there are three basic questions I want us to consider. First is the basic one of what is developmentally appropriate effective practice? And then what is the relationship between POLE and developmentally appropriate practice? These strategies are not implemented in isolation. They are part of a context of a high quality program. And then the third question, which I think is a really essential one, is that we ask ourselves, are POLE strategies developmentally appropriate themselves? I think this is essential because too often dual language learners are quote unquote taught English using instructional strategies that are not either developmentally appropriate or effective, such as over-reliance on whole group teacher-directed instruction that requires passively attempting to listen to what the teacher is saying. And this is not an effective or appropriate strategy for any child, but it's especially not effective for dual language learners. So, first question, what is developmentally appropriate practice? I've been attempting to answer this question for almost 40 years now. I've written numerous books on it, and there are actually whole libraries written on it. And it's not an easy question to answer, but there are some fundamental principles of it. And NYC has recently revised a position statement on it that they have disseminated since 1986. And their current definition is that they are practices that promote each child's optimal learning and development through a strengths-based approach to joyful, engaged learning. And in order to do this, educators have to recognize the assets that all young children bring as individuals, both individuals and as members of families and communities. And they need to design learning settings that help children achieve their full potential across all domains of development and content areas. And this is the whole child approach that we're also familiar with. And you will see later in this morning, you will see wonderful videos and visuals that illustrate a whole child approach. We need to recognize and support each child as a valued member of that learning community. And I just want to emphasize this last point about the need to be, in order for it to be developmentally appropriate, our practices must be culturally and linguistically appropriate for each child. More than ever, NYC is not only recognizing but emphasizing that child development occurs in social and cultural context. And for children to succeed in school, we must build on those funds of knowledge that they bring with them from their families and communities in order for them to make sense of what they're learning in relationship to what they already know. And that's exactly what happens when we build on children's home language and as they learn English, as they acquire English. We're helping them build on what they already know. So how does this happen? How is it implemented? First, the foundation of developmentally appropriate practice is what teachers know about child development and learning. They need to know the science, and that's exactly what Linda was just talking about, the science of dual language learning, and that's what these practices that we're going to see the rest of today, the POLE strategies, are based on that science. Because the ultimate goal, and I think this is really critical that we understand, the ultimate goal is to promote the development and enhance the learning of each child. If a practice does not contribute to children's ultimate development, then it is not developmentally appropriate by definition. So if children come to school speaking a home language and lose it, or if school diminishes rather than contributes to their development, then it cannot be developmentally appropriate. And this is exactly what Linda was just talking about. Children will lose their language if it is not supported, and that cannot be a developmentally appropriate approach. Our goals for children need to be achievable, but also challenging. This is what developmentally appropriate, those two words mean. To be achievable, but also challenging for most children within the age group. And this means that children will make progress. POL strategies are designed for children to make progress in both their home language and in English as they acquire English. But just think it's critically important that we recognize what children already know, that's the achievable part, but that also give them challenges. And those challenges have to be within the range of what they can achieve. So those challenges, if you think about a dual language learner and a program that does not support them, it can be too challenging. And basically children can be overwhelmed. So that balance, that match between those two ends of that continuum is really critical. And in order to achieve that match, teachers have to adapt. They have to adapt their teaching to the strengths and the abilities of individual children within that cultural and linguistic context. So, what is the relationship of developmentally appropriate practice and POL? Well, first of all, as I said, these practices are not implemented in isolation. They are implemented within the framework. Developmentally appropriate practice is the foundation on which a high quality program is built, and it provides the framework within which these strategies are implemented. But alone, while it is necessary, it is not sufficient to effectively promote the development of dual language learners. Again, this is a point Linda stressed. Global quality will not be sufficient. Both developmentally appropriate high quality programs and POL strategies are needed to support dual language learners. In order to do that, educators have to intentionally use these proven strategies in addition to what they would usually do is in the teaching in a high quality program to help children not only acquire English, but further develop their home language. So the last question is, I think, a really important question. Are POL strategies developmentally appropriate? The answer is yes, all caps, yes. But why? Why are they developmentally appropriate? Well, first, they are based on the most current research about effective practices for dual language learners within the context of a high quality program. Secondly, they actively engage children in guided play and with adult scaffolding during child and teacher initiated experiences in learning centers, and they engage children in large and small groups in which teachers interact with children, and children interact and learn from one another, the way Linda had just described. More competent speakers of the language, both languages, in fact. These strategies are intentionally planned and taught throughout the day and used throughout the day. And you'll hear about the POL strategies. They include intentional messaging, key identified vocabulary words, songs and chants, the way Whit described this morning and engaged us this morning. And the way POL strategies are implemented during the day, during extended activities, is actually developmentally appropriate practice in action. And you will see that through the videos and the photographs throughout this morning. So in conclusion, I just want to say that serving dual language learners acts like a magnifying glass on the developmental appropriateness of an early childhood program. If you observe the children, dual language learners in that environment, what do you see? Are they joyfully engaged? Are they individually, is their individual development and learning promoted? Is there support for their home language as well as helping them acquire English? In a high quality program, developmentally appropriate practice supports each and every child's sense of safety and belonging. Their family and community and culture and identity are embraced and supported. And it's very obvious that joyful, engaged learning is going on for each and every child. So now it's my great pleasure to turn to Linda and Elizabeth, who are going to actually describe our POLE strategies, the personalized oral language learning strategies that we know are developmentally appropriate and effective and that are absolutely necessary in every program that serves dual language learners. Thank you all.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's Elizabeth Magruder. I think Linda's probably adjusting her microphone because I know there's been some echoing. So just want to do a quick introduction of myself. I have the great pleasure of contributing to the Fresno Language Project and Language Learning Project, and I serve as a support system for early education professionals as they continually strive to support their dual language learners. And it's been such a wonderful and inspiring experience over the last few years to be able to spend Saturdays where these wonderful individuals have come together to do some learning and sharing, and it's been a unique pleasure in helping support their work with dual language learners. So let's get started.
Hello. Oh, I'm kind of in and out here.
Okay.
Talk about
we can hear
problems. You. But I'll do this very quickly, just to tell you a little bit of background around the personalized oral language learning, or POLE strategies. Originally, we designed this approach as one of the very first transitional kindergarten programs in the Los Angeles Unified School District. And those were in the years 2010 to 2013. So we've been continuing to develop and refine these strategies over time across different districts. So at that time, it was one of the most enjoyable professional experiences that I've had with this team of developers. This was way back when Whit and Carola and Elizabeth and I had the unique opportunity to be totally supported by a school district in designing an approach that was appropriate for early childhood classrooms, had multiple languages of children, and primarily English-speaking teachers. And this was one more point about the context. This was also during the time of Prop 227, when many teachers were dissuaded from using their home language or Spanish in the classroom because they did not feel comfortable introducing languages other than English. Hence, the POLE strategies were designed to help teachers support multiple home languages when they either spoke only English or did not share languages with children. We used all of the research that we could find at the time. We reviewed all of the curricula that had any kind of goal around serving English language learners or dual language learners. And we decided that certain curricula were appropriate for the goals and the population of this population, but there was no comprehensive approach that included and reflected the research and addressed our population and the goals of the transitional kindergarten program. So we designed a program based on everything that we knew, and we called it POLE, or Personalized Oral Language Learning. So, and again, our intention was to provide a set of tools, hence the toolkit that you have, that all teachers can support all languages, which we know from the research is the basis for future school success for dual language learners. So,
And Linda, will you share with us the statement
Okay.
that we turned into a chant later on about when it comes to learning two languages?
right. I was at a meeting with the federal government at one point, and I had like 2 minutes to describe all the research. So I summarized it in these 2 pithy points that kind of distill everything that I talked about earlier this morning. Well, when it comes to learning languages, actually, 2 is better than 1. We know that. There's overwhelming evidence. Bilingual children are advantaged. And we also know that early is better than later. That early language exposure, systematic, intentional, high quality language exposure in more than one language kind of nurtures that brain architecture to expand and grow in ways that monolinguals don't really experience. You want me to do this one too?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So as I have been researching and speaking to audiences all over the country, one of the things that I've discovered is that there's a belief structure that filters everything you do around second language learning and even first language learning. So I came up with this little thought that you must believe in your bones. It's not enough just to say it. You must believe it, that having a second language, in addition to English, is a gift and not a disadvantage. And diversity is a resource, not a problem to be solved. We have to see the advantages, the assets, the benefits, not just to the child and the family and the school and the community, but the society at large, to diverse groups of children that know multiple languages. That is our contribution to contributing to a better society.
Thank you, Linda. It's such a powerful statement, and I really appreciate that based on research and data and best practices, developmentally appropriate practices, it was really our charge when we looked at combining strategic tools to arm teachers with, to really be able to empower teachers and providers as they work with dual language learners and their families. What would be some of the principles that we really held as important and as a priority in thinking about working with young DLLs? So we focused and set out to create POLE strategies around 3 basic and critical support systems, and that was around the family, the environment, and instruction. So as we move forward to the next slide, we recognize that while POLE was developed long before we faced the current challenges of the pandemic, the strategies that we share with you today can really be adapted and used by adults who continue to care for children while sheltered in place, including parents and providers and caregivers. And so today we're going to focus on those strategies as they're used with children in a variety of learning environments. But later in the presentation, we will hear some ideas on how to incorporate POLE into distance learning. And communities who are part of the the language learning project are really finding that incorporating POL strategies continue to be a foundation, whether they're working in direct service or in distance learning. So let's kick this off and start with our first POL strategy, family languages and interests. So where do we start? Let's click one more time with the family. It all begins with the family. And we've heard today from so many of you when Linda had asked you to reflect on your early learning experiences with language or learning a language other than your own. I was really struck by some of the chat box responses. Some had feelings of being disconnected from school and home. Some had this worry with them coming into a learning setting where they didn't understand the language being spoken. Some commented that they really valued and reward it as a reward, that the value of being bilingual is really critical. But many of you said it was really hard to learn English later in the school environment, and that some felt left out. Another comment that was in chat that I remarked on was someone had shared that they learned English and a second language, Tagalog, early from caregivers and in primary school, and that they had learned both languages simultaneously before they were 6 years old and didn't find it as challenging. And that was such a gift. I want to share with that person what a gift and asset that was, because the school and home partnership is critical. And getting to know families in your care is really the first step in learning how to best support the child. Creating time and space to meet with parents and caregivers to talk about their child will really open up lines of communication and build trust. So early on, we put together a form that providers might use to gather this type of information about the family, their language preferences, who speaks to the child, in what languages, what are some areas of interest of the child, what talents do they have, what things capture their interest at home, are there specific toys or books or things that they engage in and play with every day. So this form was a way to capture these types of information. And while we often say it's most ideal to meet in person, sometimes providers, need to talk with parents on the phone, or it may be in a quick dialogue at drop off and pickup. But we really wanted to house this information in one way so that you could record information and have really multiple uses and experiences in your ongoing conversations with families. So it would be to capture information, but to also, as the child evolves and develops their language skills and their interests, that you're also using that information that you're learning from families to begin to plan really intentionally about how to set up your environment or reshape your environment, how you might strategically support in home language and in English skills and language capacities around interests of the child. And so this form was not considered an intake form. Many people have lots of different forms that they use. Some are required, others aren't. But it was really just a way to start an initial conversation and a way to continue the conversation and learn and grow with the family. So in the next slide, we have a video sample. Our colleague, Barbara Blakely, really demonstrates in this very short snippet some ways that our colleagues can really demonstrate and honor and value and represent the many languages of the children and families in their programs. So take a quick look.
Ways that I've tried to support children's home language when I don't speak their language. And I would say one of the things that here at my school, we have 26 different languages spoken at home here at our school. Hooray, everybody, how are you? How are you? How are you? Hooray, everybody, how are you? But one of the things that we do here is we have just as simple as a good morning song, a hello song, and we try to make sure that we say hello in all the different languages that represent all the children in the class, and then other countries that are major countries in the world. How are you this morning?
So when we talk about family engagement, you know, oftentimes we think about family engagement as a process. It's something that you do with families. And oftentimes it's considered an event that you put on with families. But really, in our minds, it's a process that starts the very moment you first meet a family and welcome them into your program. And it continues to evolve, and that caring and trusting space continues throughout the time the child's in your care. So there are many ways to continually involve parents in your learning settings. So programs can provide many strategies, tools, and structures. Some of them are conversations that you're having through an intake form, through asking questions, getting to know their preferences. These conversations take place, again, pick up and drop off, holding parent workshops or events. Maybe it's a sit down with a parent to get to know them, to share progress. And we think about that in-home and out-school support as a way for us to be ambassadors. As providers, we are ambassadors. We are advocates for all children, for the diversity and interests that children bring. We support, and we want to engage families in a way that we're helping to prepare them for the exciting opportunities that children are engaged in as we're trying to develop oral language skills with them in home language and in English, and that we're using specific strategies to do this. So why is it important to partner with families? The first and foremost, you know, tenet and principle here is building relationships. Without that relationship, there is a disconnect, and we really want to promote and again advocate for that partnership and to deeply convey to families that they are their child's first teacher, and that we are building on their culture, their experiences in a way that in our planning we intentionally build learning opportunities that reflect those cultural perspectives and language skills. We are partners in their care, and we're also reinforcing and modeling the importance of maintaining home language, continuing to develop home language while acquiring English. In this next example, we'll see Barbara again, and this is, you know, many of you have asked if I'm a monolingual English speaker, I don't speak the language of the children in my care, how can we best support home language? And one way to do that is to look at the resources around you. Do you have staff members or families, parents willing to come in to be able to work with children, whether it's storybook reading, whether it's running a small group, or engaging in outdoor experience? There are lots of ways to be able to engage. In this example, we'll specifically see a mom who is working with two children, reading a story using a dialogic reading approach in Spanish. And in dialogic reading, there are many opportunities. We encourage you to learn more about it if you're not familiar with this approach, but lots of opportunities to ask rich, open-ended questions, to elicit back and forth conversation with children, and be able to expand on vocabulary and language. So let's listen to this example.
Developing language is developing language. We want it in children's home language as well.
¿Van a ir volando a las casas? ¿Van a ir a visitar? Se van de visita a los patitos. Bueno, vamos a ver qué va a pasar en la historia de los 5 patitos. Que se fue a la finca, entró a la casa y cerró la puerta. Sí, yo creo. Sí. Y mientras tanto, mamá pata, ¿qué hacía?
Limpiando este.
Planchando.
Sí, I was gonna say that, but I forgot.
Pero ¿sabes cómo decirlo? Planchando. Sí. ¿Planchando qué?
La ropa.
La ropa.
Y mi grandma plancha.
¿Tu abuelita plancha? ¡Qué lindo!
También mi mami.
¿Tu mami también plancha?
¿Cómo está mi grandma a México?
So we just saw there a beautiful example of home language support. And I'm sure many of you noticed that one of the children responded in English, but that the mom who was volunteering stayed in Spanish. It was an intentionally planned activity where she was really using dialogic reading and an approach in Spanish, using a book in English, but really staying in that language. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later. But the home language, engaging families as a partner in the process of helping to develop their children in the best way possible is such a critical and important piece. It's a beginning, it's a middle, and it's an end. There's no, we meet in the beginning and then we don't talk to someone for a couple of months. It's really this shared experience all along. And being able to hold conversations on a regular basis with families will help you be more intentional in how to set up your environment and how to strategically plan for work in expanding language and vocabulary or language experiences. So let's move on to environmental supports. This is our second pull strategy, and it really begins where we left off, which is from our conversations with families. What have we learned about them? What interests them? How can we set the stage for really active and engaged learning that's developmentally appropriate, that's language rich, that's warm and welcoming and inclusive, and that's safe and organized and has clear and designated areas for children to learn and develop and grow and experience and explore. And so when we look at specific ways to really support that environment, when we're creating this inclusive, warm, engaging space, it's really important that children and families see themselves in this space, that they have access to each learning area, that they have the ability to explore materials and information in their languages to help them learn and develop. And that children and families' language and cultures are represented and they're visible. So that might look like special objects or items from home that they bring in to share about who they are, what they care about, and what defines their culture and their personal experiences. We may show that through environmental print around displaying schedules or instructions, as you can see here, newsletters for families in home language and English, providing books in multiple languages that represent those in your program. There are many, many ways to strategically support learning in all languages. So environmental supports are visually engaging and interactive. So with these print-rich spaces for children to learn, there's an opportunity for children to engage and also co-create. And it's this space where children in this co-creation and interactive way, they're engaging in conversations. And so this could look like interactive word walls or charts and labels or storyboards where children can use language to tell a story or retell a story. Environmental supports provide visual information. So in the toolkit, we have specific focus areas on ways environmental print can enhance this visual information that children are receiving. And that's through labeling. When we look at labeling, we often say, you know, the languages that are represented in your program should have a visible label. So if you have objects, and you'll see some examples on the right with these photos, if you have objects and manipulatives, things that children are using and engaging with, or areas where they're going, clear labels that are represented in English and home languages is really important. Now, for those of you that have, you know, in Barbara's case, something like 24 languages represented, you're not going to have 24 languages labeled on every single item in the classroom, but you might choose 2 or 3 languages that are prominent and always have other ways to engage children in, so that all languages are represented. And so you saw in Barbara's video, there are ways to do that through boards, bulletin boards, welcomes, different ways to say hello. So lots of ways to represent. You'll see here color coding is important. It helps children to map language to a concrete item or object. And so while they may not be able to read a whole word yet or recognize a sound symbol relationship, the pictures along with the words are an important visual cue that will help children associate with the word and object. And these are all precursors to oral language development and pre-reading skills. The added benefit is learning a language other than your own, and the reinforcement in hearing those vocabulary in home language and English, and it really supports that meaning making and language use. So we talk about facilitating rich conversations. What does that look like? When there are clear designated areas for exploration that pique children's interest, this is the most wonderful way to hear language throughout the day. Areas like dramatic play and construction and art and book corners give children the opportunities to see language, to hear language, and to use language as they play and co-create together. And with the support of an adult who listens, can ask open-ended questions and support and expand their language skills, this is a wonderful way to observe children, to understand where they are in their language skill sets, how they're using home language to make meaning, and how they're practicing and acquiring and using English. So these areas are wonderful ways for children to explore, and it promotes small group interaction. So in small groups, the materials and activities you provide really help support concept development and vocabulary development and oral language development. So children are actively exploring together, having back and forth exchanges and shared experiences. And so you might have materials of interest to children. You might have parents and families who might help bring items in, or even help you create things like a puppet, board, or a dramatic play area. Children might help co-create their environment. So opportunities where children can really use their language, hear language, be exposed to new language, rich and interesting words with adult support, your environment really sets the stage for that active engagement. There are also spaces for independent learning. So these are times when children may be really hard at work on a task in an interest area, and we know that happens all the time. There are moments when staff can observe the child, again, asking questions, engaging in back and forth dialogue, focusing on what the child is actively exploring in the moment. These are wonderful opportunities to help build vocabulary and language skills as the child is immersed in their task. We also know how important it is to value and support home language. And so environmental supports in that print-rich environment can achieve that. And there's some examples here in these pictures of ways to incorporate home language through print, and books, and word walls, and cognate charts. A cognate chart is I just want to spend a moment here. It's a really powerful way to help children hear and see shared language patterns. So in this cognate chart, you can see common language patterns in Spanish and English, which helps children really identify similar patterns in words, the spellings, and how they sound. And it's a great way for children to make those connections with each other's languages and to learn from one another and to begin to make those connections together. It's really a wonderful way for children to bond. And it's a wonderful way to show that we have a common language, and many words that we use have a common and shared pattern. And our brains really look and seek ways to connect and map language. So in this next video example, let's look at a way that Maritza partners with families to really shape her environment.
It's their environment, it's their second home. So we really try to make it inviting and welcoming for them and a part of them. Our environment reflects families and culture in the way that we have a family tree in the classroom. And so at the beginning of the school year, we encourage parents to provide us with a picture or two of their family. And then we display that picture on our family tree. The children get very, very excited to see their picture up on the tree. They go show the other teachers, their friends, their peers, their families. And so they might be talking about their brother, but we might never seen their brother. So they're able to show us on their family picture who their brother is. We also provide other opportunities for the parents to describe their children. So we have pictures of the children and words that their parents have provided for us, and 3 words that describe them. In a way that the children feel special because their parents were part of that, of putting those pictures together. We printed the pictures, the parents provided the words, and so they're able to see themselves in those pictures and the words that their parents provided. We also provide opportunities for the families to share special events that they've been going to, special activities that they've been doing at home, and they provide the pictures. And then we display them in the classroom, and the children get very, very excited about showing their peers maybe a family trip that they went on, or a vacation that they took, or something special that they might have done at home. And so we're able to showcase those pictures for the children to, feel a part of the classroom by having those pictures here with them.
Great. So again, Maritza gives us some ideas on, oh, is it? Okay. Sorry, I thought it was still going. So Maritza, you can see in that example, really shared some ideas on how to engage families in the process. And it's such a beautiful way to, again, share culture, language, experience, perspectives, and the children visibly see themselves in the space, which is a joyful place to start. So we've talked and explored quickly two of the strategies, the importance of family and the environment. Let's dive into our third strategy, instructional supports. So there are many opportunities throughout the day for rich language exchanges to happen, whether it's spontaneous, as children are exploring and experiencing things in the moment, or when the adults have a more focused learning activity planned. It's almost always in response to the child. And we all know that we can have a wonderful, intentionally planned activity with children, and we've got it all organized, and we have the materials available, and the focus switches. And so I want to spend just a moment talking about that. When we say in response to the child, it doesn't mean that the lesson that you planned and what you had anticipated for that task in the moment needs to go away or be set aside, but there is this beautiful point where children oftentimes lead, and they tell us in many ways what they're interested in learning and what they're getting out of that experience. And so oftentimes we have to pause and really allow that experience to happen. Knowing that we can get back to our plan at any time is a comfort, but really spending and prioritizing what the child is saying and experiencing in the moment is a place where you're going to learn a lot from them and be able to support them in language-rich conversations. So as we think about instructional support, what does that mean? We're thinking about ways to really guide rich language development. And so oftentimes it starts with teaching and learning moments in mind. Instructional supports are really strategies that encourage language use, beginning with introducing concepts and words in a variety of ways. So concepts might be introduced using a theme. You might have curriculum that you use, that you have a specific concept that you're exploring or a theme. And it should also be about building off the interests of children, especially if you're working with infants and toddlers. So a good place to start is with some a gathering of resources. And as we're looking at guiding a rich language experience for children, we oftentimes have looked at what resources like books and materials and realia do we have to support language use and help children build and expand languages. But we can go deeper than that. It's not just about that storybook experience. It's about what we're doing throughout the day to connect meaning for children around a theme. And so we came up with the 4 tools here to consider: the anchor text and experiences, an intentional message, songs and chants, and the use of gestures and visual cues. So I'll talk a little bit about each one. The anchor text. So the first instructional support here is really a way to help enrich vocabulary by intentionally selecting vocabulary in books and materials that you're using, that we're reading and using those words repetitively to really foster concept development and language development through conversations and through activities. So when we're introducing a theme or a concept, a good start would be to gather books and materials to support the theme. And again, if you're using curriculum, a packaged curriculum, oftentimes there's a book list and it comes with big books or board books of sorts. So that's a good place to start, including looking for other books and both nonfiction and fiction examples, so that children can see in nonfiction ways, photos of real items and objects and the vocabulary that you're selecting. So as we're previewing, it's important to do a book walk first, looking at pictures in the anchor text, choosing vocabulary words that you'll introduce and focus on as you plan learning activities for this theme. And so we oftentimes call it creating a word bank for ourselves, because having a central place to select these words will help you integrate the words in the other tools that we're going to be sharing. And there's a way to embed this vocabulary, use it in different ways throughout the day. And I would say that complex words, which we'll talk about in just a minute, rich and interesting words, words that you may even think are too complex for a young child to learn, are not too complex for a young child to learn. It really comes to life in how you present the vocabulary words, how you show meaning and help them to make meaning and connections. When we're working with infants and toddlers, exposure to language is critical. Lots of words and lots of frequency. So for infants and toddlers, selecting vocabulary won't necessarily be based on a theme or packaged curriculum. It really should come from the child's lead and interests, and also what the family's communicated to you. And so it could be concepts and ideas that are being explored literally in the moment as a child is deeply focused on something. It could be a book, a picture, someone's face, the light switch, a toy. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to use language with children to begin to expose them to words and use those words repetitively. So it's really more about infants and toddlers' interests in the moment, and it may not always be involved with a book or written print. So again, anchor texts, anchor experiences are rich words, rich literature, and experiences that anchor a big idea or concept. These words are used, read, revisited over and over. That consistency is really important. Hearing it repetitively will reinforce the concept and the word. That we're thinking thoughtfully about selecting rich content and academic vocabulary. And that this is really a nice start. That word bank of rich and interesting words will be used and integrated in intentional planning. So let's focus for just a moment on vocabulary. So we all know, even as adults, learning new words can be challenging. And so how do we make meaning? And more importantly, how can we help children make meaning? There are so many words. So even in one book, you may have many, many words to choose from. And if you're exploring a concept over time, you may use all of them over time. But being selective and intentional is the key, because you're going to be using these words in a variety of ways, activities, and experiences. Being selective and intentional is really important. And then because you'll be using them in a variety of ways, repetition is the key to cementing meaning, making meaning. But when we're thinking about what words represent, especially for our dual language learners, we know that it's easier to learn a new word when we actually know and understand the concept. So for dual language learners, if they know that un edificio in Spanish, for as an example, is a building, and they have that concept in their home language, then it's easier for them to learn the word building in English because they have that conceptual understanding. It's harder to learn a new word when you don't have an understanding of the new concept in your home language, or any language for that matter. If you don't know, then learning and understanding that concept has to happen in the first language, in the home language, in order to be able to understand it and learn it in English and other languages. So as we're thinking about that selection and being really intentional about how we're making meaning for children, it has to be paired intentionally with a variety of approaches. And so I want to share in this next slide a video of our colleague Jessica and how she uses the anchor text as an experience with children to develop language.
It's called Just Like Us. Trees change as they grow, just like us. Do you know that trees change as they grow, just like us?
Yeah.
They do.
You born just like the tree.
You're right, look, he was born This is a seed. You need to do what with it?
Grow it.
What do you need to do?
Put it in the dirt.
Do you know what that's called when you put it in there?
No.
Remember?
Soil.
Yeah, you plant the seed in soil. It says you plant it in soil, then you add something. What does it mean? Water. Then you water it, and then you have to take care of it. So the importance of anchor text is that it anchors the whole experience. It's a text that we select for it to be it encompasses all of that we're learning. So it has the vocabulary words, the intentional message, and it has a repetition in there, and it becomes this experience that the children get involved in. As you saw, they're participating, they're asking questions, we're having a back and forth conversation, they're hearing those words, and then later on, that text becomes an experience that they come back to, and they want to revisit it, and they take that on and we expand upon it. It grows. How? What does it need? It doesn't grow by itself. It needs water. It needs somebody to take care of it. Right?
Soil.
And soil.
And
sun.
But how does? But it's so little.
It's so little.
And what? How the little one can make a big one?
I don't know. What do you think? How does it happen, Liam? How do you think it happens? You know how you're little right now? Do you know that one day you're going to be an adult?
Yeah.
Just like your mom and dad? Yeah.
And my mom and dad may be old.
Yeah, they're growing too. So interactivity during reading an anchor text is really important because without it, it's kind of just you reading a book, but it's not that experience that we're looking for. So to bring that learning alive with whatever study or whatever concept, potential message, vocabulary you want them to learn or that you're talking about, you have to have them interact. That's where the gestures come in, the pictures, standing up and showing them things and previewing it. It's really important to have back and forth conversations because you need to hear what they have to say and how they're processing everything, get their understanding, and then you can expand upon that. The book that I read was one that we created, myself and my classroom team, because when we were looking for a text that conveyed the message that we wanted and the vocabulary that we wanted, we couldn't find one. So we thought, you know what? We kept looking and looking and couldn't find a text that just encompassed everything that we needed it to. So we thought, let's just make one. This is the perfect opportunity to show the children that you can be authors too. So we talk about like, oh, you know, I said, Mr. F made this book. He made it. And then the fact that the book has someone they know in it, and it becomes this guessing game of they're guessing, who is this growing up? It's your teacher. So there's just an opportunity to take it to another level.
I love the idea. So if you don't find a book, make your own, co-create one with the children. What a powerful way to use language experience together. So I want to talk a little bit about supporting home language. What does this look like? So when we talk about the anchor text, it's really important for our dual language learners to be able to have opportunities to experience the text and language and vocabulary and concepts in home language. So reading the anchor text, including the targeted vocabulary, so that vocabulary that you've pre-selected in home language, days before, a week ahead of time, before it's introduced in English, will help children make meaning, understand the concepts, and really, in a social emotional way, they're going to connect deeply when they learn it in English. They will recognize it, they will know it, they will use the words in their home language, and you'll be able to map that to English in a really, a much more meaningful way. Consider sending the text or targeted vocabulary home in the home language for families to work on at home and to prepare and use with children. And I would also say that reviewing, so it's one thing to introduce and preview, but after that concept has been introduced and the theme has been, the activities have been planned and experienced in English, it's always important to be throughout that learning experience and those activities and that theme to be reviewing targeted vocabulary in very real, meaningful ways, and to be continuing to use home language so that children are drawing that connection. They're going back to the place they know, that concept is really cemented in their home language, and they're practicing and applying and using English vocabulary. Let's move on to the intentional message. So we've talked about the anchor text. Another really critical way to embed vocabulary in meaningful written and verbal messages is using the intentional message. So this theme is about structures. We might have a written message that really sets the purpose of a learning activity or an experience that's going to take place. So here's an example. Today we're going to observe and build a structure. Big words here. Observe, build structure. These could be words that you pre-selected for your theme around structures, and we're now starting to embed them in different ways. We always have the intentional message along with visual representation. It's never a static message that hangs off somewhere as just words on a page. It's always with the intention of demonstrating and showing visually what this means. Here are some examples, exposing them again to rich and interesting words, selecting words that are relevant to their learning experience. They're theme-based sometimes, and they're also based on what they are discovering in the moment, what they're excited about. That you're using these selected words in formal and informal learning times, story time, meal time, outdoors. There's no limit. So again, keywords here, wash, dry, laundry. So the concept of laundry. Scientists, observe, green, squirmy, caterpillars. Explorers, fingers, gently, touch, flowers. All rich and interesting words to be exploring with children through thematic learning. Here's an example of an intentional message that can be introduced. So we live in a neighborhood. You can see in the photo, there are picture examples. There are also different structures on the floor. So this provider is really beginning with a powerful word, neighborhood, and exploring the concept of a neighborhood. Using realia, you can add descriptive words to connect to deeper meaning, and you can start embedding vocabulary into the intentional message as you go and as children are using language. So if we click one more time, we'd see an example here of an expanded sentence. We live in a neighborhood with houses, parks, and tall green trees. So here's a way, whoops, can we go back for just a sec? Here's a, thank you. So we're expanding as children are perhaps using language, providing ideas. Maybe it's in a book that you're reading or realia that you're, exploring, or it could be at a center where children are talking about the neighborhood and you're helping them to expand and use language. Another example, many animals live on a farm. What might we add to this? So if we keep clicking, we might add that many animals live on a farm, like a cow that says moo, or a sheep that goes baa, or pigs that say oink, or goats that bleat. So we're expanding this message. Intentional messages can also be during activities that aren't necessarily a formal lesson. So it could be during music and movement. Let's use our bodies to wiggle, slide, jump, and twist. It could be to music and a pattern and a cadence. So children are using their bodies, they're hearing language, and they're chanting perhaps, and they're using these rich and interesting words to demonstrate with their bodies how they move. The key is using these repetitively and using them in ways throughout the day that children have practical ways to apply their learning and experience it and use language. For infants and toddlers, you might focus on something of interest. So here you see a baby interested in a mobile with leaves hanging down, and that mobile probably hangs during the fall time. So you might focus, as the child's interested here, on the words red, orange, and leaf. Touch the red, orange, leaf, 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 as the child's patting the leaf. We talk about TPR, total physical response, where our body moves as we're engaging and saying the word, which is cementing and mapping that meaning back to the child. It's very interactive and lights up that brain. Another example of an infant toddler who's in the mirror. So as a child's waking up from their nap, maybe they have some mat time and they're moving. So it could be that you're saying the child's name. That's Sada, Sada, Sada. Sada's moving and kicking her legs. Kick, kick, kick. As Sada's kicking, you might be holding her little feet as she's kicking and saying the word kick, kick, kick. And so because infants' movements and routines are often predictable, an intentional message is a verbal message that's describing and mapping what they're doing in the moment. TPR is total physical response. So when we use the intentional message to describe what the child's doing in the moment, we're revisiting that often. So it's not that Sada's not going to come and kick her legs. Every time she kicks her legs, you'll be using those words as she's doing it. Again, making meaning for children, and you can be doing this in home language as well. So let's look at a quick video about the intentional message.
I see animals with different colors. Okay, so this is a duck. And Troy, what's this? Troy, what's this? A brown bear. And I see a red bird. And I see an animal that's a blue frog and a black sheep. So I'm gonna go ahead and get some animals down that have different colors, and we're gonna read our book. The importance of toddlers having a simple, intentional message is they're hearing it over and over and over. As they're doing the routines, they get to reflect back on the intentional message that we said before during the circle time. And so as we're doing our small group activities, I can remind them, and then they start saying the vocab that's in an intentional message also. I base my intentional message on what I'm seeing the children doing. So from what you saw me doing today, I started seeing my children really interested in animals and what they're doing or the animal sounds. So I brought it upon myself, maybe that's something attention mission I should use because they're already showing that in the classroom. They're showing me this is what they're needing. I think that's really important because that kind of shows the love that we have, the caring of what you like, the interest that the child has.
So Aisha really hits it home for us that repetition is key and intentionality is key. So our third support under instructional supports are songs and chants. This is probably everybody's favorite and not new to any of you in terms of how to use music and chants to really embed vocabulary and to get up and move, and for children to really have a joyful experience as they're learning and not even realizing that they're learning. So these are oftentimes songs. We can go to the next slide. They're songs that we embed with vocabulary. So again, our identified vocabulary, our key content that are woven into familiar songs and chants to really, again, encourage repetition and reinforce meaning. And so I'm not seeing the next, there we go, thank you. So a couple of examples on the left, this might be something that you do with younger children. It's more of a chant, but you can put it to music. And you can see some of the words there, open and shut and clap and lap. And so you would be pairing ways for children to move and show what open and shut and clap and lap mean. On the right, we have an ABC song, and again, this is based on the theme of structures, excuse me. So you would embed your key vocabulary: build, structure, tall, strong, base, space. And these are all ways for children, again, to make meaning. They're integrated. You can use them throughout the day in different ways.
Elizabeth, sing that song.
Which one?
Build the structure.
Okay, so I don't have the singing voice that Mr. has, so I will do my very best and just bear with me. And if you have to hold your ears, I understand. So here we go. Build a structure very tall, build it strong so it won't fall. Build it strong right at the base. Add more blocks, it needs more space. Build a structure very tall, build it strong so it won't fall. Yay. Okay, all right. So just some ideas. And another thought here, if you are not or you don't see yourself as a creative person when it comes to embedding vocabulary and making up words into songs that are familiar, there are so many websites. I'm struck by this. I love creating them, so it's a challenge for me and I enjoy that. But if it's not your thing, don't worry. There are plenty of resources out there that you can turn to that already have songs, and in several home languages as well. Okay, so let's look at our friend Jessica as she's introducing a song with her children.
Seedling sapling tree.
Sapling tree. Seed sapling tree. Sapling tree.
What do you do? Plant a seed and it grows into a tree.
Wait, but the song and chant is throughout the day. That's like one of our key experiences that we can use that repetition of the vocabulary intentional message. If you notice, our vocabulary intentional message are both in that song. So we're repeating that all throughout the day. During transitions, whole group, I usually open and close with that before I excuse them to do something else, transitioning inside to outside, going to meals. You'll hear them spontaneously singing it throughout the day during an independent exploration. It's just throughout the day that's become one of our most important pool strategies that we use. Baby. Should we say toddler or kid? Or child? What do you think? How about we say child? So we'll say baby, child, teen, and then adult?
Yeah.
Baby, child, teen, adult. Ready? Let's do it. Baby, child, teen, adult, teen, adult. Baby, child, teen, adult, teen, adult. Wait, you don't plant us. What happens? A baby is born, then it grows into an adult. Baby, child, teen, adult, teen, adult. Because we both change. Trees and adults. So a song and chant can come out of nowhere. When I first started with pole, I was like, I cannot write songs. There's no way I can do this. But now they're my favorite part. And as you saw, like the children love them too. They help come up with the gestures and their thinking comes through in those songs and chants. So we made one up right on the spot and I never thought we'd be able to do that, but their thinking is amazing if you just let them. So on the Pool Strategies board, we have everything. And that reminds us, but also the children, they reference that a lot when I talk about the anchor text and the song and chant, their experiences. So having the song and chant up there is another way they can recall that experience that we've had. I've had children come up to it and just start pointing and singing as they see it. And so it's important for it to be up so that they can reference that over and over. No, they can't read the words, but they know those visuals, they know the gestures, they know what we've been doing, so they're able to reference it. You can remember songs from years ago that you had an experience with. So singing that over and over, it gets in your head in a different way that reading does. Yes, books stick with you, but music has a whole nother power. So songs and chants are very powerful in conveying different messages and vocabulary. It's really the repetition and the beat of the music.
So I have to say, one of the most beautiful moments in that video for me was Jessica asking the children what words they wanted to insert. And the difference between, she gave them options, kid, child, and they chose child. So again, it was co-created in the moment, which is a wonderful experience. And again, speaks to the idea of language experience and use and helping children see themselves in the joy and being part of that experience. Okay, so we've reviewed anchor text and experience and the intentional message and ways to continue to embed those key selected vocabulary and how the power of music and chants and again, really increase experiences for children to use their language. Let's talk a little bit about gestures and visual cues. So I don't know anyone, any child at least that I've ever met that doesn't love to move when they're singing or chanting and even learning. And so visual cues and gestures are a wonderful way to also map language to meaning. So physical movements and signals can be repeated as specific vocabulary. You might assign a specific signal or movement to a word. And so each time you're using that word, you're pairing it with that movement, whatever it could be, a sign, a movement, something physical that children can do each time they hear that word. And it's really fun when children can be part of creating what that movement or signal might be. Let's look at a very quick example of Barbara's and how she has just done a quick strategic vocabulary lesson using gestures.
You guys are going to cruise. Ready? We're fishing, we're cruising. Are we going anywhere fast? No. Do we have anything particular we want to do? No, we're just cruising along. Oh,
The other thing that I think this program allowed us to do is just expand on language development. I've had more time to realize that in years past you had so much to get through that you just pushed on and you take for granted that some vocabulary children understand because they see it in the context of the story or the book. That's not true. Sometimes you just need explicit teaching of certain vocabulary words.
All right, so how do we incorporate pull strategies during activities and routines? And so thinking about those moments that happen often, daily routines, how can we embed pull strategies to help expand and develop language? So in this case, we're not just changing the baby at the changing station, we're talking to the child. And maybe we're singing a song that the child's interested in or that the group has been learning. Or maybe the child is focused on a light switch. And so you're noticing what the child is doing and you're helping to use language and help expand language. So we're really capitalizing on those moments where we're not in formal instruction or we're not in a planned learning activity, but we're in a routine. Another time is during hand washing, as an example, another typical routine. And so again, a song and a chant not only allows children to know they need to continue washing until the song is over for timing and, you know, all the requirements that come with that, but it's also just really fun and a key way to embed that vocabulary in the moment while they're doing something. And so I'll just sing a couple of lines. On the left side, we have to the tune of Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush. So this is the way we wash our hands, wash our hands, wash our hands. This is the way we wash our hands every single day. This is the way we scrub our fingers, scrub our fingers, scrub our fingers. This is the way we scrub our fingers every single day. And then we go on to rinse our hands, and rinse those germs away. So we've got wash, hands, scrub, fingers, rinse, germs, lots of rich words. And again, on the right, good and clean, the happy birthday song. Again, a great way to embed key vocabulary and a fun way to get the hand washing over with. We also have lots of opportunities to support language learning during routines in home language. And so you'll have opportunities if you have staff or families, if you don't speak the language of the child, but you have staff that could help support this process and this language experience for children, having it up to read. That's the other thing. Have these somewhere where you can access them, because if you're like me, it's sometimes hard to remember the first few times, and then you can't forget it. You're singing it in your sleep. But you may have quick access to them on a poster on a wall or something where you can get the hang of it, and anyone could probably sing the song who came in to support children. So in this case, this is to La Bamba in Spanish. So, yo me lavo las manos. Yo me lavo las manos con jabón y un poquito de agua. Un poquito de agua y jabón y me lavo, me lavo. Ah, me lavo, me lavo. Están limpias, muy limpias. Manos limpias, ch, ch, manos limpias, ch, ch, manos limpias, así. So while I was singing that, of course, my body's moving and I have all sorts of hand signals going on right now. Now, of course, they're washing their hands, but at the end, super fun to hold up those hands on así and show me that they're clean. So lots of fun ways, and songs and chants are such a powerful way to get those words squeezed in there, making meaning for children, and a joyful process. So again, you can use pull strategies and support home language at different times of the day through music and movement, through outdoor experiences, through free exploration, at mealtime. And also in your interest areas. This is a wonderful way to invite families and yourself really tap into resources, to have interest areas to be able to explore concepts, to explore children's language and culture, to build on interests and go deeper, explore new things in engaging ways, and all along to share and connect with families about what matters most. So just to recap, a lot given to you today, and quite quickly, the toolkit will help. The PowerPoints, I hope, will help. I think you'll have access to the videos and the content for today, but just want you to really begin to think about, none of this is new to you. None of this is unfamiliar territory. This is building on some strategies, really thinking more intentionally about what you already do in a way that will help bring intentionality to how children are exposed to, use, and apply language and meaning in home language and in English. So start with the family languages and interests conversation. Look at the language goals that the families have for their child, and what you have in mind, how you'll begin to plan an environment to really have those spaces and places for children to learn, hear, use, and do. And that you're thinking intentionally about your planning. Again, whether you use a packaged curriculum or you're developing themes and concepts on your own or in teams, having rich language interaction starts with understanding the child, thinking about concepts and themes to explore based on the child's interest and themes, really providing that systematic exposure that Linda talked about earlier today in home language to be able to bridge concepts in English. Using those poll strategies along with partnership with the family, tapping into resources, your staff. If you're monolingual English and don't speak the languages of the children who represent your program, it is so important to meet with families and community members. And many people have reached out to do that, even if they're reluctant to join in to the learning environment. This can happen at home. And just encouraging you to remember that family is really the first resource, and that partnership is critical throughout. So I just want to thank you. Thank you for spending your Wednesday morning with us. And I'm not sure if we want to do questions now, if anything came up.
Elizabeth, let's listen. We're going to have time for some questions later, but I would love to go directly now and listen to some of the people who've been learning from all of us poll strategies and hear how they feel about it.
Sounds great.
Hi, I'm Jessica Gutierrez, and I am a pre-K teacher in Fresno, California. The poll strategies have completely transformed my teaching. They have made me so intentional and really helped me reflect on what I'm doing to support oral language development for our young dual language learners. I think about how I was teaching before I was in the poll strategies, and I really don't know what I was doing. I mean, of course, I've always been intentional, I've always planned, but it's never been to the level that it is now. Now I have a clear plan of action. Anytime the children express interest in something, or if we're going with a new concept or topic, I know exactly where to start. And that is with the poll strategies. I know that's my foundation of all of my teaching. There's no question of how to build their learning based on that. And so using the poll strategies has just made me really intentional with all of my instruction, and specifically with oral language development. Thinking about our current state of COVID-19 and having to jump into this new world of distance learning, when it first happened, I had no idea what to do. I think I was in the same state that many educators were in, of, where do we go from here? How do I even start? And especially, it was a unique situation with our young children and our young dual language learners, because so much of our learning happens through interactions in the classroom and through play. And so we were presented with the unique challenge of, like, how do I still create those same experiences with our young learners and our young dual language learners and still connect with their families? And the first thing I turned to was my poll strategies. I knew that that was the foundation of my teaching in the classroom, and it had to be the same thing during distance learning. And so I turned to my poll strategies. I set out a plan based on my poll strategies, and I knew exactly how to go about it so that I was providing everything that I could for my young dual language learners and for their families. I've gone to recording songs and chants in English and in their home languages, using the vocabulary, sending that home as I would if we were in the classroom setting, using intentional messages and vocabulary, and recording read alouds of anchor texts in their home languages as well in English. And the poll strategies have really proven to withstand any environment and any circumstance that I've been put into. And it just really solidifies the fact that They are so foundational and they're just so incredible in helping me be intentional and just really reflect on how I'm providing the best service that I can for not just our dual language learners, but for all of the children that I encounter in my profession.
Hi, my name is Laura Borsegin. I am the infant teacher at the Student Parent Early Learning Center for Fresno Unified. I, as the infant teacher, have used the PULL strategies daily with my infants. While the infants are engaged in exploration, I follow their lead and use repetitive vocabulary to support their oral language development through anchor text and daily experiences. The best part of singing songs and chants in my classroom with my infants is seeing their little faces light up when I begin to sing. They stop what they're doing, they come over and begin to imitate my body movement and gestures. This is one of the funnest parts of our days where we could just have fun and enjoy music.
Mi nombre es Magali y yo quiero hablar un poco sobre mi experiencia participando en el proyecto de aprendizaje de lenguaje. Antes de yo participar en este proyecto, hacía las planeaciones para las actividades con los niños, pero no estaban integradas. Tenía un tema, pero el resto de las actividades del día o de la semana no estaban relacionadas a ese tema. Al día de hoy, con las estrategias que yo aprendí, yo puedo hacer planeaciones con más facilidad. Se me facilita el trabajo y yo puedo seleccionar un tema, puedo anclar un libro. Me gusta seleccionar vocabulario de acuerdo a la edad del grupo con el que estoy trabajando y planear muchas actividades divertidas dentro y fuera del salón. Algo bien divertido es incluir la música, porque en mi clase a todos nos gusta bailar y cantar. Entonces es una manera muy fácil de que los niños aprendan el vocabulario, utilizando las canciones que ya no sabemos, pero buscando una tonada diferente y usando el vocabulario. Todas estas estrategias han facilitado mi trabajo y también facilitan el aprendizaje de los niños. Agradezco mucho que yo haya podido participar en este proyecto y espero que la situación de emergencia por la que estamos pasando no vaya a detener el tener más proyectos como este. Y aprovecho para darle las gracias a todos los involucrados en planear estas clases. He aprendido mucho, creo que he tenido un crecimiento profesional y el resultado se ve en el trabajo que yo hago con los niños.
Hi, my name is Kristen Sell. I am a teacher over at the Early Learning Center for Fresno Unified. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how the PULL strategies work for me since I only speak English. PULL has helped me connect and give access to students in their home language on a daily basis that I otherwise would not be able to. So with songs and chants, which we do in English and Spanish and Hmong, if I have any students in that class that year that speak Hmong, and the intentional message, which we do in 3 languages, it gives me a daily access point into their life that I wouldn't be able to if I didn't have PULL strategies to kind of lean back on and to guide my intentionality for that day. I'm also incredibly lucky that I work with people at my center that speak several languages, and I get to lean on them, and they help me connect to those families, which has really created an organic sense of community and connection that otherwise wouldn't happen, because I have these other amazing people that help me connect to parents that I otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Hi, I am Samuel Limon. I work with our family, friends, and neighbors at our Play and Learn Center. Using the PULL strategies has redefined my practice as a facilitator. I am more intentional with my planning, using the intentional messages, anchor text, vocabulary, and my favorite, creating chants. Having these tools reshape my center's practice, especially when it comes to labeling my entire centers in the child's home language. One of my great takeaways is seeing how the children get excited when they hear the chant in their home language. Even for my monolingual children, they get fascinated and intrigued with singing the exact same song with a different language. When we do our extended activities during our session, it allows me to model in front of my family, friends, and neighbors, whether it's asking specific questions or pointing out vocabulary. Our family, friends, and neighbors can replicate what we are doing at our center and taking it back home with them. By them doing so, they're having the children continuing the learning throughout the day. and not just at the center. I have a Spanish speaking babysitter who takes care of two monolingual English speaking children. She was fascinating that we were creating our own chants and songs, and she wanted to use some of these strategies at home. I was more than happy to give her some tools and some resources on how to pull vocabulary from a story, or if the child is learning to do something new, like the 2-year-old really washing their hands on their own, how to create a song or chant but through that action. The next week she came back saying how she created a song with washing her hands and singing it in Spanish, and the child was washing their hand, demonstrating to me while he was singing, which was really amazing to see. And I was able to share that chant that she created with my entire center. So then everyone was able to sing the exact same song in English and in Spanish when they washed their hands, which was very fascinating to see. And it really is easy for our family, friends, and neighbors to really take poll strategies from our center to their home. It's very simple and it's not complex, which is really great and amazing. Having the poll strategies has really changed my practice within Helm Home, which I'm very fortunate for.
Mi nombre es María Barrios, soy proveedora de cuidado de niños. Tengo mi licencia por 14, desde las edades de 3 meses hasta 13 años. Antes nomás leía un libro, nomás en inglés. Ahora con la estrategia de Paul, como ahorita leemos Brown Bear en español e inglés, tenemos nuestro vocabulario, nuestra intención, mensaje, la canción. Como por decir, yo les mando un paquete a los niños con su canción y su libro en inglés y español. Otra cosa que hacemos también son sus dibujos, que hacemos cualquier, sea pintar o dibujar. Otra cosa, usamos mucho las palabras en el daycare. Otra cosa que usan ellos también, por decir, que yo les mando a sus papás, cantan la canción en inglés y en español en su casa. Y otra cosa también, ellos llegan cantando a mi daycare la canción con gusto aquí en mi daycare, o si van a cualquier tienda o lugar, si oyen esa canción, dicen, oh, pues yo la canto en mi daycare o con la teacher. So esa es una comunicación que tenemos con los padres abierta. Cualquier cosa, ellos me preguntan a mí de la canción o del libro. Eso les gusta mucho a los padres y a los niños también. Ellos llegan cantando a mi daycare.
We hope that you found those videos, those testimonials helpful in seeing how our community are implementing the poll strategies. We're going to go on to the next section, which is the toolkit review. In this presentation, we're going to be doing a quick walk through the toolkit. We're going to go section by section and provide a quick overview of the information that you will find in each section of the toolkit. In this slide, once you open up the
Maria, this is your friend, Senor Whit. I see in the question box a lot of people about the toolkit. If they don't have it, will you remind them about they're going to give them the link where they'll be able to access it digitally, and then we'll mail it later?
Yes, so there was an email that was sent out with the link to the digital version of the toolkit. We also want to make sure that you get a hard copy of the toolkit. So towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to put on the chat box that information of who you're going to be contacting to make sure that we mail you out a toolkit. So once you open up the toolkit, you're going to be able to see the cover page. Followed by the cover page, you're going to be able to see that there are 9 sections that are divided by a tab. Following the table of contents, we have, you'll be able to find an acknowledgement page. We wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the developers of the toolkit. The development was a collaboration effort by Dr. Espinosa, Dr. Oliva Olsen, Elizabeth Magruder, Dr. Bettercamp, with Hayslip in the early childhood education community in Fresno. And the toolkit, as we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it was possible through the funding that we received from CDE. So this is section 1. You'll be able to see that in section 1, you're going to find the introduction and project background. You're also going to be able to see subsections, project background, more of the community need, addressing the challenge, professional development sessions and coaching, looking back and moving forward and getting started. You're also going to be able to see a set of questions to consider before you get started. In each section, so we're showing you what you're going to be able to see. So this is in section 1, the first page. In section 2, the science of dual language learning, as Dr. Espinosa shared at the beginning, some of the major findings and conclusions from the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine report, you're going to be able to see that in detail. You're also going to be able to see the importance of support for home language, the importance of exposure to English during the preschool years. You're also going to be able to see detailed information about growing up with 2 languages, documented advantages of early bilingualism, and the difference between dual language learners and monolinguals. And this is going to be the first page that you're going to see in section 2. And then when you get to section 3, this is on developmentally appropriate practices, high quality early education for all children. In this section, you're going to be able to find information on what is developmentally appropriate practices, a caring community for learners, for children and families, developmentally appropriate learning environments, the importance of goals for young dual language learners, and how to teach the way children learn. And Dr. Bredekem covered a lot of this information during her presentation. This is the first page that you will see in section 3. And then moving on to section 4, you're going to be able to see this is the presentation that was covered by Dr. Linda Espinosa and Elizabeth on personalized oral language learning POL strategies. It will have sections on how were POL strategies developed. There's details about family engagement, environmental supports, and instructional supports. I saw in the box, there were questions about accessing the family engagement, the interview forms. They're also available. And this is the first page that you see on this section.
And just reminding that they are available in Spanish and English?
Yes, they are available in Spanish and English and Hmong. And then when we get to section 5, how POL strategies align with developmentally appropriate practices. This section will provide information on how each of the POL strategies is based on the current knowledge and effective practices for dual language learners within the context of developmentally appropriate practices. And this is what you're going to be able to see within the first page of section 5. And then when we go to 6, this is the biggest section of the toolkit. It's on professional development and the language learning project. This section offers guidance for ongoing professional development as a pivotal component of the implementation of the language learning project. Within this section, if we go on to the next slide, this is the first page that you're going to see for section 6. And then the next, this is where you're going to be able to see there's 5 sessions that are provided in the toolkit to be used during professional development. And each one of the sessions will cover, we'll have an agenda, the PowerPoints, the feedback form, and any other additional resources that are needed for this training. And then we go on to section 7. It's on coaching and the language learning project. This section will cover basic functions of language learning project coach, the partnership between the coach and the practitioner, coaching goals and reflection. It's going to have all the coaching tools and also building capacity for ongoing support. So here you're able to see the first page of section 7. And then we also have here one of the coaching tools, that how is it going form that is used between the practitioner and the coach. And then we go on to section 8, and these are the takeaways. We also wanted to make sure that we provide lessons learned from the communities implementing the language learning project. So these are some of the takeaways that you're going to be able to see in the toolkit. And our last section that we have in the toolkit is section 9, additional resources. And for this piece, I'm going to go ahead and ask Dr. Oliva Olsen to join us and talk a little bit about this tool.
Thank you, Maria. So this, the tool is geared for teachers to self-rate themselves, sort of like a self-reflection, and also in working with a coach to find where they are in the process of implementing the comprehensive approach of all of the elements of PUL. So it helps guide teachers in seeing where they are and what to focus on next. So you'll see that there's it's divided in two parts, with infants and toddlers, and the other one on preschool. And eventually we'll have a website. It's almost ready, but where you'll be able to do this online, and also have access to video that explains each of the items. So in terms of the self-assessment or the self-rating, there's each of the items under family supports, environmental supports, and instructional supports. And it allows an educator to look at where in the continuum of implementation he or she is, and what kind of supports you might want to use from the toolkit in moving forward to implementing that with full consistency. Thank you.
Thank you, Carola. In addition to the tool that Carola just went over, we have additional resources. So you're going to be able to find this page on the toolkit, and it talks about PUL Strategies, the training platform. We have a website that has been developed specifically for the language learning project, and it's called pulstrategies.org. If we go on to the next page, you're going to be able to see that this is the first page. Once you go to the website, this is the first thing that you're going to be able to see. This is the main page. And then within the website, you're going to be able to find, if you click under environmental supports, you're going to be able to find videos on showcasing the environmental supports. And then it goes on to instructional support. So you're going to be able to have access to the videos of the PUL strategies and actions. You're going to have access to professional development sessions that we mentioned that are also in the toolkit. You're going to be able to download the toolkit. And then also this is where we're going to be putting the recorded webinar, today's webinar, as well as the PowerPoint. Anything that you see on this website, you are able to use. I hope that this quick overview was helpful. Now I'll go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Oliva Olsen. Carola.
Thank you, Maria. I'm seeing all the comments in the chat, and they're so positive, and many of them have asked similar questions, so it makes it easy for me to collect these comments and questions to share now. So one of them is, what happens with children who have with special needs? Does the toolkit include specific adaptations for children with special needs? Let's see, Whit, do you want to address this?
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. That we believe that as part of, as Dr. Espinosa's research has shown, that we do know that that the research is clear that a dual language approach is appropriate for children with special education needs as well. I saw one question that had to do particularly with children who are visually impaired. One of the things that we would talk about is taking the expertise of specialists in that area to help with the implementation of the PUL strategies. So that, for instance, one of the things we know, you heard from Elizabeth, that the PUL strategies are both written and oral. So that you would be looking at the PUL strategies, both written and oral, if you are introducing Braille. You would also be looking at labeling in Braille, so that what you're adding to the richness of it. It's, as Sue Bredekamp said, it's the foundation, and it's that we believe it's a foundation for all children. These are strategies. It is not a curriculum, and so we look to you, the experts in its field, to help us with the adaptation. For children who are hearing impaired, we would look clearly at the use of adaptations around sign language, and so that we're feeling like that we want to look at what the heart is of developmentally appropriate practice and of the strategy. And we are open and anxious to work with all of you who are specialists in those areas to help us with that. We want this to be an evolving tool. And so we would love to have sections where, say, someone who worked with the visually impaired or hearing impaired could help us with these are some specific strategies to add to that.
Thank you, Whit. The next question has to do with assessments. And there were several questions about whether the toolkit includes assessments or and which are the best assessments for children who are dual language learners, and if it aligns with the use of the DRDP.
I'll start with that, and then I want Carola, you to help me with it as well. That we are clearly looking at the DRDP, and we have followed the progress of children who've been in this program, and we feel we're seeing wonderful results from that. We also feel it's not enough. I'm going to tell you that. Well, I also want to let people know that, and we'll be happy to share this, that the project itself is being looked at by multiple researchers. And so that from the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, we're working with 2 research groups. We're working with Engage Research and Development, and we're working with New America. Engage is looking at more quantitative, and New America at qualitative. And then in terms of the project we're doing with the California Department of Education, we are working with Harder and Company. And with the project we're doing with First 5 California, we're working with AIR. So we're getting results from those, which we'll be happy to share with all of you. We are finding positive results. Some of the best internal results that we have seen have to do with following the kids as they're entering on now into the K-12 system. And we see them doing very well, doing better than their peers who did not have this program. But I also want to talk, Carola, you mentioned where we decided that we were not getting enough language information simply from the DRDP and what we've been using there.
So with the DRDP, we realized that we needed to focus more on distinguishing how to gather information, collect information from the children and including their families on language and literacy development when we do not speak the languages of the children. And that is a very different different data, different documentation that what the child knows in English. So that there needs to be more support in identifying the unique ways in which you can document, especially with families, the input from families, how children are learning and developing language and literacy skills in any language, in both the home language and in English, to have the full picture of what the child knows and how the child is developing, and that is different from English language development. And so, yes.
Will you tell them that we have been using a tool that we now,
Yes.
with all of the children in the project, is looking at home language development, and so
Yes,
talk about that tool?
Yes, so for language proficiency, we're using the pre-IPT. There's a new version that has just come out, and so now you can do it online. But the pre-IPT gives us information in English about the child's language proficiency in English and in Spanish. And it's a easy tool for teachers, for educators and providers, teachers and providers to use. And it gives us information about the level of proficiency that they're coming in with, but also especially in dual language programs where you're using a dual language model, implementing a dual language model, you want to make sure that you have a balanced number of children who are proficient in both languages. There is, for some programs who have been asking for screeners that look at language and literacy development in Spanish specifically and in English. It's also available, I think, in Hmong. Some programs have used the IGDs, individual growth and developmental indicators. So that's sort of the example of the tools that we are familiar with and the approach that we're taking around the concept of assessment. So let's see, then there's another question. I think, Linda, this is an important one that I saw almost 3 or 4 times. And I think, Linda, you might be able to answer and address it well. It says, this is challenging to implement in a state that by law is an English-only state.
Right. And that was California when we first developed POLE and started implementing it in our transitional kindergarten programs. In an English-only environment, you agree with the goals of acquiring English. What you add on to that is the need to also continue to develop the first language, and that's where we have an educative task to work, if it's policymakers or parents or whomever, that emphasize that their top and sometimes even their only priority is really acquisition of English, and we help them to understand then why that home language is so necessary and critical to achieving high levels of English proficiency and actually succeeding later in school. So we don't object to the goal of acquiring English, but we do it in the context where it's an additive environment and not subtractive, so that English should never come at the expense of maintaining and developing the home language. And I mean, at some point we can go into exactly what happens to a child who loses their home language, but there can be very negative consequences to that. So yeah, I mean, that, and in some states that is the state policy, and they consider themselves English only, Arizona, for instance, and Massachusetts, but they're both trending toward supporting dual language programs.
And Linda, I think the point you made is really important. When we first implemented POLE in California, that was the policy in California as well. So what Linda said in terms of making the point that we were not in any way interfering with English language development, but it was additive to it.
And luckily, after Proposition 58 passed, we have a very different scenario platform that we are navigating. And so it's easier to work around, even though it wasn't before the policy something that was directly stating what we could and could not do in early childhood, it was perceived in that way. So
right.
Now with this change, things have changed significantly.
Right, and we ran into that, and that's why we really focused on teacher beliefs and attitudes early on, because if you believe you're working in an English-only state, and sometimes we even heard teachers feel like they may be punished if they spoke the child's home language, and so you have to kind of work through that before you get to the actual strategies, because teachers should always feel supported, both by us but also by their whatever administrative structure they're working within. One thing I did want to add about the assessment, because this formative assessment that the DRDP uses is so absolutely critical to understanding both how that child is developing in English. So in the DRDP, infant, toddler, preschool, there is that English language development domain, which helps you sort of chart the progress toward English proficiency. And then for all of the other domains, physical, motor, math, science, the ECE educator is guided to recruit native speakers of that child's home language when you don't speak it, so they can provide input to you as to how they're progressing in their home language. Because and it may be approximate and not nearly as precise as what we have in English language development, but it gives us some input and insight into whether or not they're continuing to use the home language and how they're progressing in that, even though we may not be intentionally teaching early literacy skills in English. Through the strategies you heard today, we are promoting it. And so it's important to monitor that progress as well, because if we don't, I mean, I do believe if we don't assess it, it doesn't get taught. So we do need to have assessment address both languages.
Thank you, Linda. And I think this question will be good for you as well. It says, what happens when classrooms are too busy and have too much information in every wall? Can't it be overstimulating for children?
Well, it can be. I mean, it can be overstimulating for adults too. If you walk in and there are things just, you know, in neon kind of glaring at you, yeah, so you want to simplify so children can focus. And if you have multiple languages, obviously you can't label everything in every language, but you would identify the primary languages and make sure they're represented throughout the classroom in these various ways we've talked about. And then those languages where maybe you have one Urdu speaker, somewhere in the classroom that child, and at their cubby, and maybe a special book to that child, and maybe a time for the parent to come in and read that book or speak to the children. So again, that language is valued, the child sees it reflected in the classroom, and the child feels accepted. And their home language is elevated by the teacher and by the adults. So I do think that's an important point, though, that sometimes in our zeal, we get overeager to put up every chart and graph and picture and statement we possibly can and then have them in all different languages. I think it is really important to have some organizational structure so you know, this is where we schedule things, this is how we label things, and this is how we put up family representations, and have some organizational so the child knows, what those pictures and print and graphical representations, what they're attached to. And I mean, I would say we're going to change those as we go through the year. As the children become more sophisticated and you start addressing different themes and more complex language. So yeah, I think, paying attention to the level of stimulation in your classroom is important. And kids can kind of tell you, you can kind of watch them. Do they start looking around and moving around, kind of sporadically and unable to focus their attention? That might be a sign that maybe there's too much visually that's distracting them.
Thank you. Elizabeth, I think this one is for you. It says, you mentioned that teachers need to sing songs in both language, on all the languages of the children. What if the teachers only speak English?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm not sure. I'm sorry if I said all languages, because what I really would like to say to that is, in terms of songs and the languages represented in your learning environment, in your program, if you do not speak the languages of the children, there are lots of ways to be able to learn keywords and tap into either staff or family members or a community member or a team member to be able to help teach the song. And also, I do think that there's a level of responsibility that providers, that all of us have in this work as we're trying to introduce concepts or songs or chants in a language that we don't speak. And it's critically important that we learn keywords, so that at the very least, if you're not familiar with being able to sing an entire song, you may have someone that can help support you with that and teach it to the children, and then you're learning in that process as well. So it's twofold. You're pushed out of your comfort zone somewhat, but you also tap into the resources around you to be able to help you to learn it and teach it to others.
And Elizabeth, one more, just an example in Fresno that at one of our centers, in terms of outreach to families, we discovered that there was a lot of musicians out in homes, whether it be older brothers and sisters or parents. And so really to access that, to let them know that we would love to have them come in. And actually in one center, they created a whole unit around the music that the families could bring into their program.
Okay,
Lovely.
Thank you.
Use audio tapes, have the family audio tape something and play it in a center.
Mm-hmm.
And there really are great products available through the internet and whatnot. So it's, as teachers are so tremendously resourceful, they can branch out and find these things that fit their classrooms.
I think that covers most of the questions. Of course, there many comments, and hopefully we'll be able to, you'll have information and on where to visit in the website, and you'll receive the toolkit. So there was a lot of the comments that participants have posted that relate to the different moments where we were discussing what was in the toolkit. So thank you. Thank you for all the responses. Maria?
Yes, so we're gonna go ahead and Senor Witt is gonna introduce the next video.
Right, just so as we're nearing the end here, we did want to hear, we've had 3 wonderful coaches that we've been working with, one in the Fresno community, one in the Kern County community, and one in the Tulare County. And so they have brief statements that they want to share about the impact of what they've seen as they've worked with the staff.
My name is Rosalba Mitz. I am the Language Learning Project Coach for Kern County. The POL strategies have greatly enhanced practices across the board in all early learning settings. For many of the practitioners, they feel more dual language competent, which then promotes more focus and intentionality in their teaching practices.
Hello, my name is Laura Campos, and I am the Dual Language Learning Coach for Tulare County. Because of the Language Learning Project, we are actually offering professional development training for teachers, family child care providers, and administrators to become more educated in how we can better help the children that are dual language learners. So as soon as these educators go back and they talk to their parents and they inform them of the new things that they learned and how important it is to maintain the home language, the parents are becoming empowered. They're excited that their children are maintaining and using the home language. So then we have a few of our children ready to transition into kindergarten. And those parents are actually going back to the school districts and saying, you know what, I want my child to continue to be in a dual language learning classroom. So now school districts are acknowledging and recognizing how important it is for those children to continue with the dual language learning. So then in general, just our whole community is excited about, dual language learning and the added benefits that these children are receiving. And it's a whole different way of thinking.
Hi, my name is Ana Arámbula, and I am the coach for the Language Learning Project Fresno with Fresno Unified. As the coach, I've had the opportunity to support ECE educators that provide early care and education in their homes and in early learning settings to children birth to 5. Over the past 4 years, I've participated in professional development training, learning alongside these educators. As a coach, I provide ongoing coaching support to these educators with the implementation of the POL strategies. My coaching with the educators is strength-based, collaborative, and grounded in self-reflection. During my coaching sessions with these educators, they reflect on their own work with implementing the strategies and identifying goals that they would like to achieve as they continue growing. We collaborate on steps that the educator can implement to achieve their goals, and it is all documented on the how is it going from. This is a form that all of you will have in your toolkit. This is an example of the how is it going form that I use when I meet with the educator for a one-on-one coaching session once a month. Since we received the shelter-in-place order due to COVID-19, I have been able to continue to support these educators via phone calls, via Zoom meetings. Educators are sharing all about the amazing work they are doing to support their children and families. Some examples of ways that they are using the POL strategies virtually are sharing songs and chants with the families, the intentional messages, activities that families can do at home with their child to support the learning, reading books via FaceTime, via Zoom, and some are recording themselves reading stories in the child's home language and in English and sharing those videos with the families. Others are also recording themselves singing songs and chants in the child's home language and in English and sharing those with the families as well. It has been such an honor to be able to be part of the amazing work in supporting these educators and supporting our young children, including our dual language learners. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank everyone for all of your dedication in supporting all of our children in our community. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I always like to start with the song, so I've got to sing one more time. And so that when we were working with our communities, with Kern and Fresno and Tulare counties, we decided that we wanted to create a song and chant to thank them for their work. And so that this is a song and chant to thank them, but it's also to thank you for your work out there. So I'm going to start it here. It goes. The Language Learning Project has come so very far. Supporting language learners is a part of who we are. We've grown so much together and we are proud of you. Thank you for your work with children and their families too. Jessica.
Estamos felices de tanto que aprendimos con mis familias trabajando unidos. Gracias a todos por todo el amor. Gracias a ti, a ti, a ti, a ti. So now I'm going to pass it on to Deanna, who will do our closing.
So first of all, we want to thank all of you for joining us this morning and engaging in learning about how to better serve young dual language learners and their families. As an implementer from the beginning, an important aspect to this project, and as you think about implementing in your communities, it's very important that you face this project and this learning, these learning modules as learners, from program directors to executive officers to teachers to assistant teachers. We all joined in the learning. We called it a petri dish. We joined in there together as learners, not as one person being more of an expert than the others. We had the fortunate opportunity to have these wonderful experts, Dr. Espinoza and Elizabeth and Carola and Whit and Sue, come in and support us. But it's very important that you all join in as learners, and also that you approach it as a community, not just as your own agency. I think one of the most important factors that we took away from this project was that we are better together. And I think as we face the world's problems right now, we are learning that in real time. We are better together. We face these problems from our own boats, but we're all facing the same kind of problems and we're tied together with love. So, as a community, I learned so much as a school district employee. I learned so much about licensed home providers and the role that Children's Services Network plays, and learning about these amazing educators that take families into their homes was just so humbling. And I walked away from this knowing more and being a better educator. So we appreciate you. We're here for you. Feel free to reach out, and thank you for joining us.